It really breaks my heart to see things like this. The courthouse where Diamondfield Jack faced trial, and you had William Edgar Bora and all of the lawyers around this and all of the interests with the sheep herders, and now it's just on sale. And I hope whoever buys it, because it's been on sale for a few years now, I hope whoever buys it understands the history and at least does something to preserve it.
As I recall, and I'm not the historian around here, but Hardy Sears, who was over there at the City of Rocks, over in that area, had a store over there, a business, and he decided that when Albion was made the county seat in 1879, he decided to come over here and build a hotel. So he came over here and started building this building here. And that was, I guess, about the time they were putting Minidoka Dam in over there or something. And before he got the hotel finished here, he decided there was more money to be made over at Minidoka than there was here in Albion. So he went to Minidoka, and the county officials that are here now, Albion being the county seat, they bought this building from him and finished it out and made it into a courthouse. The courtroom was upstairs. This down here was the county offices. Told Burley, he said these were the actual chairs, and they'd taken them down to Burley, and they were upstairs. It was storage there. And she talked about them. They let Albion have them back and brought them up and set up this little counter, welding back, and some of them worked with her. And these were the jury chairs, these swivel chairs. Used to come in here, the sheriff's office, sit down on this end here, and then the county offices, the county clerk and the assessor and the superintendent of schools, and the head offices down here. In the back here is a stone structure, and a lot of people think that is the jail that held Diamondfield Jack during his trial and stay here. But that was not the jail. The jail sat over on the park, about where the pump house is now. This stone building back here was built because in those days the biggest threat people had was fire. And they'd already had a fire too with county records and stuff, so they made this stone addition back here, and they kept, that was the records vault. Yeah, this wasn't the jail, this was the records vault.
Now, am I mistaken, or is the jail that he was held in over in Oakley now?
Yeah, the Oakley's dad came over here, Albion, on 4th of July, and said, can we borrow that, take over to our 4th of July celebration?
So it was said that in the 1870s, a man by the name of John Sparks, who would later go on with his influence and his cattle baron status to become the governor of Nevada Territory. And he built up this status because in the 1870s, he used his skills as an outdoorsman that he learned as a Texas Ranger to come up from northern Nevada and Elko County up into southern Idaho. And he and a couple of other ranchers established a huge, just vast swath of land that he started using for grazing cattle. But this was a cattle country. This was cowboy country. Down south to Utah, you had a vast number of Basque immigrants and Mormon sheep herders. And sheep herding was considered, well, the cattlemen called them, even cowboys. It wasn't just the cattle barons, it was the cowboys as well. They called them desert maggots or desert locusts because they would come in and totally clear an area. And oftentimes, because sheep herders had a reputation as being less skilled than the cowboys or than the cattle barons, they would not understand that it was a bad thing to totally deplete an area of natural resources. So John Sparks, because he was a cattle baron, decided to hire out total psychopaths. And the one that he hired out was a gunfighter by the name of Diamondfield Jack. And Diamondfield gained his reputation as a totally psychopathic, he would enforce orders and kill whenever necessary just because he really wanted to. And he went around poisoning all of the watering holes in a weird sort of mutually assured destruction. Not even the cows could drink from them, but he wanted to get one up on the sheep herders. And along Elko County and Cassia County borders, it was a 90-degree area, they erected it was called a deadline. And it wasn't a fence per se, but it was an area that said, essentially, markings on the trees marked it as cattle country. And they said, if you cross this, whatever happens to you, and your death is very likely going to be covered up. Deaths in this conflict were rare, but on February 4th, 1896, Daniel Cummings and John C. Wilson's bodies were found. And this was another sheep herder came to deliver a little bit of wood to their camp because it was very cold, and they were camping along the deadline ridge of Deep Creek, the Deep Creek Range, a little bit to the west of here. And he found them riddled with bullets. Well, a short time later, a local sheriff who was friendly to the sheep herders heard Diamondfield Jack bragging about the murders. And he was taken in and charged with it. He was convicted, and he spent 6 years in jail. And it was a diplomatic nightmare because he was best friends, or at least he was a stock detective of John Sparks, who was at that point, by now, the territorial governor of Nevada. And so the case was dropped. Eventually he went on to live as a free man. He was going to be executed, but a lot of people were very sympathetic to the cowboys because unlike the Johnson County War, where it was small-time cattle owners versus big-time cattle owners, out here even the small-time cattle owners really disliked the sheep herders. So buried in this cemetery you have the two men, Mormons, not Basques, but Mormons and Basques from Utah, both had a reputation for sheep herding, are buried here. Daniel C. Cummings died February 4th, 1896. Death is certain, the hour unseen. Why did they kill them thus? Pin them on death's awful lance? Why pluck the flower of life just in the budding? Why didn't they give the boys a chance? C. Wilson died February 4th, 1896. Assassinated while on duty, sadly, in the early springtime. Did we lay them down to rest, away from this cold, in-feeling clime, safe away among the blessed?
All of the early water trials here in Cassia County, and these started while we were still territory, I guess, before statehood. We didn't become a state until 1890. And Albion was the county seat in 1879. So a lot of things went on, a lot of disputes with water, and all old Judge Stockslager's court trials on all the water here in the valley, which later became District 45F, was held up here in the courtroom, and they determined by court order who had what water and how much. So there was a lot of activity there. In the early days, people came from 80, 90, 100 miles away and during the holidays here to celebrate here in Albion. The old Masonic Hall that sit over here, and the Mercantile that had here had a big second story room. And so people would come here and they'd stay, some of them for a week. You know, we had about three or four hotels, as I recall, here in Albion. Historical Society, so that we can start setting up a museum there. We owned the lot next to it where we could set up parking and expansion and that. And I'm interested in whether you'll sell it, whether you'll lease it, or whether you'll give it away. I hope that you'll give it away. In those days, Albionites thought that this was the center of the universe. Because there was no Burley, there was no Declo or Twin Falls or any of those places and that. But it served here as the county courthouse for Cassia County until 1919. In those intervening years, these other communities down here on the project, particularly after Minidoka Dam was constructed and the canal system was created, wherever there was land and water, that's where people went. And so Burley was created, I think, about 1905, wasn't it? And so there were lots of activities to try to move the county seat from Albion, this little burg up here in the valley, move it down to where all the people that were coming. And in 1919, they were successful. It had and the result of that was a combination of political efforts, as I understand it, between people in Burley and Oakley. Burley finally offered the folks in Oakley, because they were interested in it too, offered them enough, even built that rail line out to Oakley and sent a special train out to Oakley, picked people up to go down to Burley to a big convention they had down there. And in 1919, they got the county seat moved to Burley.
Stairway up there, isn't it? Wide.
I'd still be careful. It feels a little like it's got some give in it.
They probably pulled all the covering down.
I wasn't going to do a video on the trial of Diamondfield Jack, but when I started reading about it, I really understood how deep Jack was in over his head. And all around him you had these politicians that would later go on to do great things nationally, trying to represent either the sheep herders or Diamondfield. And it was in 1897 that he was represented by a man by the name of James Hawley, who would later go on to be a senator for the state of Idaho. And the sheepmen were represented by a man by the name of William Edgar Borah. Now both of these men were very famous in Idaho and national politics. Specifically Borah, who represented the sheep herders, he was hired out by the Elko County Sheepmen's Association and quickly got a sentence that would result in an execution of Diamondfield Jack. He was a progressive in Idaho, and he opposed the Treaty of Versailles, so they called him an isolationist. After this, he was offered the vice presidential run by Calvin Coolidge, but he said, no, I want to run for president myself. And he missed the nomination and later lost to FDR in 1936. So he was a very famous man, elected 6 times to the Idaho Senate, and quickly Diamondfield Jack was sentenced to hang. But political machinations were going on all around him. This is the courthouse jail behind me in Albion, in what was at that time the seat of Cassia County, and he was languishing in here for 2 years before 2 men came forward and claimed to have committed the murders themselves. Now, these men were let off free because it was very clear they didn't do it, but now the public was kind of aware of all of these politicians and the scandal of Diamondfield Jack. So they reprieved his execution, and for a while they sent him up to the Idaho State Penitentiary because in 1899, the legislature in Boise passed a law saying that if you were going to be executed, you had to be executed by the state government, or in the capital of the state, and not by some local county government. But in 1900, he was sent back here to Albion because the state had declared him a county prisoner and not a state prisoner. And so it was this kind of diplomatic back and forth. By 1901, the public was very well aware, and John Sparks, the cattleman of southern Idaho and northern Nevada, he was elected to the governor of Nevada, and he pulled strings. And in 1902, Diamondfield Jack was let off the case because a prevailing public opinion was either Diamondfield was innocent, or there was sympathy because he was a Wild West outlaw, or just they didn't like sheep herders. So Diamondfield Jack went free. And for the rest of his days, he was a very wealthy, he made a good career as a gold panner and prospector, and died in old age in 1949 as he was hit by a taxi cab in Las Vegas. And even though that's one of the smallest aspects of the story, I think it's fascinating to see the end of the Wild West with the Sin City, the lights of Sin City in southern Nevada.
So, all of the court activities, all of the legal businesses and that was formed around the county seat moved to Burley. So, a man by the name of Hager, Fred Hager, and his sister Alice, and his mother, who had a store over here about where the library and the city office is over there now. They had a general store over there, and Fred and Alice thought this would make a good general store, so they bought this property. and they came over here and set up a general store. And it served through the end of World War I, through the Depression years, World War II, and Fred and his efforts in this little old general store, I think, is what kept a lot of people here alive, because about all we had was left was the ranchers and that had land here, and that most of the businesses had moved out. So we were not a prosperous community a lot of years, but Fred kept his store open here, give people goods on credit, and kept things going for all those years. Finally, Fred, his mother and sister passed away, and Fred he had one son, Lamar, as I remember, moved up around Blackfoot, and and he sold this to a couple named Arnold. The wife's name was Alice. Also, I can't remember.
Harold.
Harry.
Harold.
Harold Arnold. And they continued to operate it kind of as a general store for a lot of years. And finally their health got pretty bad. And they had children up around Nampa, and they wanted to move up there, be closer to their children. So Harold put this building up for sale. And I don't know how much interest there was in people to buy this property, but Harold told me that he had a potential buyer in Oakley that wanted to buy this property, and he was going to tear this building down and put some more modern building here. It was a pretty good location here, corner street across from the bank and that. And I thought to myself, I hate to see that old historic courthouse torn down. I'm going to try to buy it. So I negotiated with Harold, and I bought this building with the idea that I was going to make the Albion Valley Historical Society a home here. And we got together and put in a grant application to the Idaho Department of Transportation, who had a historical preservation grant of $500,000. And our eyes kind of popped when we seen that, so we put together a good grant application, and we came out first place in the competition for that. That was in the year 2006, I think it was. In 2007, the economy went down the tube, and the Department of Transportation canceled all grants. We lost that grant, so we lost a home here. This is where I thought the museum and that ought to be, is in this building, but it didn't work out. We couldn't get another grant. We've never seen one that big again. And we just couldn't raise the money and put it together to do it on local support here. So the building sits here vacant. I think it was built, what, 1885? About the period of 1885. It's still standing here in 2022. And while it is pretty bad shape, it's still, in my view, a historical building and a lot of history here. I am going to try to sell it. I'm getting the age and ability to do anything myself. So I'm going to try to sell it, but I'm hoping that I can find a buyer that says, I won't tear it down, I'll renovate it, restore it, and put it back to some beneficial use. Whether I'm successful in that endeavor remains to be seen. I've had several buyers that have come and wanted, some out of California and Utah and one in Arizona, that have been interested in, but some local families that wanted to do some work on it. But none of them have been able to carry through and get a contract put together and finance the purchase of the building. But I'm still hopeful. Still got a couple of folks that are telling me they're interested. With this downturn in the economy now, I'm afraid it's going to be another repeat of 2007, and it's going to be hard to move this whole building. You can see over here on this corner, you can see how it's settled over there. It's a good 5 inches lower than here. You say, well, what happened? The foundation don't support it? Well, in the days when they built this building, they didn't put concrete foundation on it. It's all stone foundation under here with a big, huge timber right down the center here, and then supporting members going on both sides of this big timber that sits here. Initially, the front door to this building, you see this transom up there just under the ceiling? That was the double door there. That was the entrance here to the courthouse. This door out here on the corner didn't exist, and this door didn't exist. The hallway came straight through that double door, and it came through here, and people went, and then went upstairs into the courtroom. When Fred and his sister bought this to a general store, they added 2 rooms and a bathroom on the side here. It's an add-on, and his sister and mother lived in this little apartment on the side. Fred and his wife was who was a cook, the sister to Nellie Asher.
Sorensen.
Who else?
Oh, Sheriff Sorensen.
Sheriff Sorensen, Nellie Asher. What was Mrs. Hager's first name?
Violet.
Violet Hager. And then there was a boy, Jody. Jody later had the JC Cafe here in Albion for a lot of years until he passed away. He his wife, Wilma, and that. So that's how the addition got on here. I had, when we were thinking that we were going to be able to get this very generous grant and restore this old building, I had an architectural engineer from Boise. I negotiated with him to come down here and pro bono draw up engineered drawings for the restoration of this building, and he did that. I've still got a set of drawings that shows this in front, back, upstairs, and everything, and that. I don't know if they'll ever be used, but that's kind of where we're at now. To get upstairs where the courtroom is at, we'll have to go up these stairs here and take a look. There's nothing left up there. Some of the counters that were in up there that had some kind of painting went over to the Alamo restaurant over there. And I don't know whether they're still there. Somebody told me they were in storage somewhere over there. They'd taken them out of the store and put them in storage.
Yeah,
whether that's true or not, I don't know.
We had one in the back of the store there, and
Do you?
we took it out because we built kitchen back in there.
Yeah.
It was on the wind.
And I don't know when took it, and I'm not sure where he put it.
Well,
I've told them that I've told the new owners that that it's important.
I don't remember much about that, but it was some kind of a counter that sat up there in the courtroom, and I was here the day that Harold sold that to whoever the owners were of the restaurant over there at that time. They wanted it in there for kind of part of the history of the county. And I was here and I asked him, what's that? And he said, that's the counter we had upstairs. And I said, well, what are you doing with it? He said, well, I sold it. Well, I said, I hate to see that leave the courthouse, but it did.